The bank manager scrutinized her, questioned her statements, and denied her deposit. However, within minutes, a single declaration transformed the situation. She's my mother, and I own this bank. The automatic doors of Hillstone Federal Bank opened with a hiss, allowing the late morning sun and the deliberate steps of 73-year-old Gloria Hightower to enter. She moved with a cane, not due to necessity, but because she preferred the stability it provided. Her dark green dress was neatly pressed. Her silver hair was arranged in the familiar style she's kept for decades. She held her purse in one hand, the other holding a check bearing her name. Gloria was familiar with this location. She had banked here for almost 15 years. The same branch, the same routines. She typically came in during the week, shortly after breakfast with friends at Janine's diner. However, something felt amiss today. The woman at the front desk hardly looked up when Gloria entered. Not even a greeting. That was out of the ordinary. Gloria dismissed it as insignificant. Perhaps the staff was understaffed. It was possible the young woman hadn't been taught to acknowledge older customers. She proceeded to the counter and waited calmly behind a man wearing a baseball cap. After several minutes passed, and when it was her turn, the teller, a young woman, approximately early 20s, offered a hesitant glance over Gloria's shoulder, then murmured, "One moment, please." She then went into a back room. Gloria remained standing quietly, still holding her check, still smiling gently. Shortly afterward, a tall woman wearing a light gray blazer came forward. Her features were distinct. Her blonde hair was pulled straight back, and her eyes appeared analytical rather than observant. A name tag identified her as Leslie Ryland, branch manager. "May I assist you?" Leslie asked, crossing her arms. Gloria raised the check slightly and responded, "Yes, I need to deposit this into my savings account." Leslie did not take the check. Instead, she examined it, then looked back at Gloria. "Could I see your identification, please?" Gloria readily replied, retrieving it from her purse. She presented her driver's license and the check. It originated from a retirement account payout, a standard occurrence. Nothing appeared suspicious. Leslie scrutinized the identification for an extended period, an unusually long time. She then re-examined the check. Leslie then inquired, "How did you come into possession of this?" Gloria appeared surprised. "I'm sorry," she responded. Leslie clarified, waving the check. "This check is for a significant amount. We are obligated to verify it before processing. We have encountered similar situations previously." Gloria responded, tilting her head. "I have deposited checks like this here before. There had never been a problem before." Leslie offered a strained, unconvincing smile. "Banking policies have been revised," she stated. "I'm sure you appreciate that." A gentleman seated nearby subtly adjusted his position. Gloria noticed it from her peripheral vision. The woman standing behind her made a quiet noise. Gloria sensed that someone was observing them. Gloria inhaled deeply. "Ms. Ryland, I have all my required documentation. This is my account. I have been receiving direct deposit, and I've been a customer at First National Bank for years. My name, my address, and my identification all correspond perfectly." Still, Leslie remained firm. "We still require a more thorough verification. Please come with me to the back." That's when Gloria experienced it. Not fear, not shame, something akin to offense. Not just for herself, but for every older woman who had been spoken down to. For every person who had been regarded with suspicion simply for entering a room. "I prefer to remain here," Gloria stated resolutely. Leslie moved closer, softening her tone. "Ma'am, you must cooperate, or we will have to place a hold on the funds and report potential fraud." Instances like this have occurred previously. That's when Gloria experienced a tightening in her chest. She wasn't inclined to engage in a dispute, not with an individual of this nature, not in the presence of onlookers. However, she wasn't planning to depart, so she opted to retrieve her phone. Gloria's hands moved with measured precision, steady rather than trembling, as she extracted her phone from her purse. Upon the screen illuminating, Leslie's gaze narrowed. "I am contacting my son," Gloria stated calmly, scrolling through her contacts. "He will resolve this situation." Leslie gave a humorless chuckle. "Ma'am, Contacting your son won't alter procedure. We operate under established guidelines. If there's no cause for concern, there's no need for alarm. Gloria didn't respond. She simply raised the phone to her ear and moved a pace to the side, distancing herself from the counter. She was weary of being addressed, as if she lacked understanding, as if she were incapable of handling her finances. Two tellers positioned behind the glass exchanged glances. The young man at the end of the line advanced a short distance, seemingly about to speak, but then stopped. The room was quiet, punctuated only by the gentle clicking of keyboards and the quiet whir of a copier in the corner. "Hey, baby," Gloria said into the phone. "I'm at the bank. Hillstone on Meridian. They're having difficulty verifying my check again." She paused. "Yes. Her name's Leslie." Leslie's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, ma'am. Sharing employee names over the phone is something we avoid." Gloria didn't acknowledge the request. Acknowledgement. "I'm feeling well, just a bit tired." Following a brief silence. "Okay, I will remain here." She disconnected the call and returned the phone to her purse. Subsequently, with the same composed demeanor, she stated, "My son is en route." Leslie folded her arms. "Ma'am, I must reiterate. Elevated voices or disruptive behavior may result in dismissal." Gloria inclined her head slightly. "Do I appear to be causing a problem?" Leslie's face reddened. She averted her gaze momentarily, then returned her attention. "I have a duty to safeguard this establishment. Improper fund verification puts the bank at risk." "Do you believe I am a risk?" "I believe you're not being helpful." Leslie retorted sharply. That was the breaking point. That single word. The man standing 2 places back murmured something quietly. The woman behind Gloria moved closer and said, "She is being courteous. You are the one raising your voice." Leslie addressed them. "Please refrain from interfering. We are conducting a private transaction." "It doesn't seem very private," the woman remarked. Gloria remained silent throughout the exchange. She felt no need to dispute anything or offer explanations. She simply needed to wait. 5 minutes elapsed. Leslie moved away, feigning a check of her computer, but her gaze kept lifting, much like a dog anticipating the mail carrier. The young teller from earlier approached and murmured something into Leslie's ear. Her gaze moved towards the entrance. Then the glass doors opened once more. A man entered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing a crisp white shirt, but without a tie. He seemed calm, yet focused, and moved with a quiet, purposeful stride. He made no visual sweep of the room, instead walking directly towards the lobby center, toward Gloria. "Hi, Mama." Gloria returned a gentle smile. "Hey, baby." Immediately, the room's atmosphere altered. The man turned to address the reception desk. "Is there an issue with my mother's account?" Leslie moved forward, hesitant about whether to extend a handshake or request identification. She opted for a formal nod instead. "This is your mother?" he asked. "Yes," he responded briefly. "My name is Grant Hightower." Leslie's mouth opened slightly. Her gaze shifted around the room, then returned to Gloria, then to Grant. "Mr. Hightower?" Grant retrieved his leather card holder and laid it on the counter. It displayed his ID, his business card, and his title, Hillstone Federal, Executive Board Chair. Leslie found herself unable to speak. For a full 10 seconds, silence filled the room. Leslie's gaze remained fixed on the card, as if expecting it to ignite. A subtle muscle spasm flickered across her cheek, the type that arises when a mind struggles to comprehend what the eyes have witnessed. Grant refrained from speaking quickly. He kept his hands clasped before him, standing composed and silent, his voice even but undeniably resolute. "I'm asking one more time," he stated. "Was there a problem with my mother's account?" Leslie hesitated, then asked, "Mr. Hightower?" "We were just following procedures. Large checks need to be verified, and I—" Grant interrupted, not loudly but sharply. "You looked her in the face and decided she wasn't credible. You questioned where the check came from. You asked how she came into possession of it. Does that sound like standard procedure?" Leslie's mouth opened again, but no words came. Her face had gone a full shade lighter. "I've reviewed those procedures myself," Grant continued. "I approved those actions last quarter." That documentation contains no instruction to question a long-standing customer while disregarding her identification. Certainly not with a public display in front of witnesses. The bank was quiet. The only sounds were the clicking of keyboards from employees appearing to work and the consistent hum of the air conditioning above. No one was willing to avert their gaze now. Gloria stood nearby, arms folded. She wasn't smiling. She didn't seem pleased. She seemed weary. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Hightower," Leslie stated rapidly. "This is simply a misunderstanding. I didn't intend to offend anyone." "But you did," Grant countered. "You humiliated her." "I didn't." "You did," Leslie replied. Grant's voice remained even. That was what made his statement so impactful. There was no shouting, no theatrical displays, just the facts, just his presence. Leslie's voice trembled. I didn't realize she was your mother." Grant looked at her. Why would that change anything? Leslie started to speak, then stopped. "Do you understand how that sounds?" he inquired. Leslie spoke the words aloud. For the first time, Leslie genuinely observed Gloria. She truly looked. It wasn't solely embarrassment now visible on her face. There was fear. The fear of repercussions. "Have a seat," Grant said, indicating the chair behind the counter. "I'll handle the deposit." Leslie paused. That wasn't an invitation. Leslie turned slowly and walked toward the back, her shoes clicking hollowly against the tile. Grant approached the counter, took the check, glanced at it, and typed a few numbers into the system. The young teller observed with admiration. "Here you go," he said, giving the receipt to his mother. "Full deposit. Effective immediately." Gloria accepted the slip, folded it, and nodded. "Thank you, baby. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." They paused, a mother and son in a peaceful setting. Then Gloria remarked, "You didn't need to come all the way here." Grant gave her a look. "Yes, I did. But you're busy. You have meetings. Aboard a run." He shrugged. "You managed a household for 25 years with one income, for kids, and a Buick that barely started. I can spare a few minutes." She chuckled softly. "You always were dramatic," he smiled. "And you always were the calm one." But the moment wasn't over yet. Grant turned slowly, letting his eyes sweep the room. The customers remained present, some appearing to examine their phones, while others paused during transactions, attempting to blend into the background while still observing everything. The woman positioned behind Gloria retreated slightly, creating room for them. The man who had spoken previously offered Grant a discreet nod of acknowledgement. Grant made no direct comments to them, but he did not dismiss their presence. He understood they would retain this moment, each in every aspect, not only due to his identity, but also because of what they witnessed. A woman felt diminished until the reality arrived, formally dressed. Leslie's absence was brief. She returned with a senior associate, visibly anxious, restless, attempting a smile, but unable to manage it. The older man spoke quietly to Grant, extended an apology, then indicated the rear offices. But Grant remained still. "She is well now," he stated, pointing to his mother. "However, this is no longer a simple exchange." Mr. Hightower began. "We absolutely recognize that, and we're taking it seriously. Ms. Ryland has been here less than a year. She's still adjusting to the—" "Stop," Grant interjected. "Don't explain her behavior to me. That's not your job. That's hers." Leslie remained still, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She appeared to be attempting to suppress tears, or perhaps prevent herself from speaking. According to Grant, addressing the associate, the task at hand is to assess the situation within this room and grasp the implications of a valued client being subjected to treatment resembling that of a criminal, solely due to her appearance not aligning with the image of someone who owns a yacht. Grant emphasized, raising a hand, "Have you ever met someone resembling my mother and considered she must be concealing something? Have you ever scrutinized a white customer depositing a check?" The man visibly recoiled. "That's not." "Don't deceive me," Grant stated. "I'm not the board chair today. I am simply a son. And what I observed this morning was a woman who instilled in me the values of honesty, patience, and respect, being questioned as if she had fabricated her own signature." Gloria eventually intervened. She said, "Baby," but Grant wasn't done speaking. He stated, that she could have been questioned with courtesy. She could have been spoken to privately, and any concerns explained. Instead, a public spectacle was created, and she was made to feel unwelcome. The only reason for the interruption was my appearance in a tailored jacket. A silence followed. Gloria surveyed the room, noting the expressions, some filled with shame, others with anger, still others with inspiration. She lightly touched her son's arm. "Let's leave," she said quietly. "Let's not say another word." He faced her, his jaw rigid, his chest tense. But then he saw it in her eyes. That familiar calm. The same calm she possessed while working 2 jobs and still preparing dinner. Amidst challenging circumstances, she demonstrated remarkable poise. He acknowledged this with a nod. All right. They proceeded toward the exit together, navigating past the tellers, the customers, and the visibly shaken manager who struggled to meet her gaze. As they prepared to leave through the doors, Grant paused. He turned, looked at Leslie, and said softly, "Every customer who walks in here deserves the same respect you'd give your boss. Because you never know who they are or who raised them." They departed, but the repercussions were just beginning. As Grant and Gloria reached the sidewalk outside, his phone was already vibrating. Initially, it was his assistant, then a member of the board, and subsequently the bank's general counsel. The news had spread quicker than either of them anticipated. A customer had captured a portion of the incident on video. It was already being shared. Gloria observed him. "You won't answer that." Grant allowed it to continue ringing. "No, not at this moment." They continued walking at a slow, even pace, the sun warming Gloria's head as cars passed leisurely down Meridian Avenue. She remained silent initially. So did he. It was a moment of quiet they both required. "You don't have to rush down here," she eventually said. Grant chuckled but didn't smile. "I say that every time." He added, "I can handle myself." "I know you can," Gloria replied. She stopped before a bench and sat down. Grant remained standing close by, looking at his phone screen without unlocking it. The notifications accumulated, resembling stacked bricks. However, he wasn't prepared to construct anything from them just yet. Within the bank, Leslie Ryland remained motionless in her compact glass office. A regional manager had already contacted her. Human resources required a report before the day's end. Yet, none of that held significance for her at that moment. The image of how Grant had regarded her lingered in her mind, as if revealing a perspective that diminished her, not through disparagement, but because it highlighted the limitations of her own assessments. The subsequent morning brought forth a communication from Hillstone Federal's board. It announced the commencement of an internal investigation, alongside assurances that customers will be notified regarding adjustments to sensitivity training and customer relations policy. However, this represented merely a public statement. The truly significant developments unfolded privately. Later that week, Grant took his seat at the head of the conference table, the familiar space typically used for investment strategy and profit reports. This meeting, however, had a different purpose. "I want every manager to recertify on customer service protocol," he announced, "but not with those same corporate videos from 5 years ago. We're engaging outside instructors. I don't want lectures. I want eye contact, role play, and reflection." An older board member expressed surprise. "That's a significant change." "It should be," Grant responded. "What about the manager?" Grant hesitated. He was reluctant to dismiss Leslie, not because she didn't warrant consequences, but because he didn't want this to appear as retribution. That wasn't the upbringing his mother provided. "She is suspended," he stated eventually, "subject to review." However, his focus is on addressing the underlying cultural issues that led her to believe that kind of conduct was permissible. Later that evening, Gloria settled into her preferred chair near the window at her home. The house was quiet, punctuated only by the ticking of the old wall clock and the gentle simmering of her evening tea. Grant was settled on a couch, his tie undone, his shoes slightly loosened. "You handled it well," she said. He shrugged. "I let myself get angry." "You should have," he replied, looking up. "You're not upset," Gloria said with a wry laugh. "Darling, I've experienced far more challenging situations." She continued, "This isn't the first instance someone has attempted to make me feel like I don't belong, and it likely won't be the last. That's the most troubling aspect, Grant stated. She took a sip of her tea, acknowledging that this wasn't a new situation. You can't control how people treat you, Grant said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Only how you respond to them. Gloria smiled. I just dislike that you had to deal with that kind of behavior at this stage in your life. That's the interesting thing, she replied. The older I become, the less it affects me. What caused me pain wasn't her words. It was the fact that she believed she could speak to anyone in that manner. She paused. Perhaps now, she won't. Despite the difficulties, a positive outcome eventually emerged. The subsequent week, Gloria revisited the bank. She wore the same shoes and carried the same purse, but her demeanor had changed. Upon entering, every employee behind the counter visibly adjusted. The newly appointed temporary manager, Denise Alvarez, a woman with a quiet voice, approached the desk to greet her directly. Miss Hightower, she said kindly, we are pleased to see you. Gloria offered a slight smile. I'm simply here to withdraw some funds. Certainly, I will assist you myself. As they walked toward the counter, Gloria observed that the posters on the wall had been updated. The advertisements for loans and savings plans remained, but new posters, a series titled Respect is Standard, now hung near the front. Each featured portraits of real customers from the local community, all sharing the same tagline. We see you. We serve you. We respect you. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a beginning. Denise processed her withdrawal, demonstrating patience and clarity. Straightforward and professional. Before her departure, Denise stated, we're holding community meetings beginning next month. These will be listening sessions. Grant asked us to invite value customers like you. Would you be willing to speak? Gloria expressed surprise. You want me to deliver a speech? The response came, not a speech. Simply share your story, however you prefer. Gloria considered the request. I will attend, but I won't present anything in a misleading way. That's precisely what they wanted. She left that day not feeling entirely satisfied, but she felt acknowledged. And at her age, that carried weight. Later that evening, Gloria sat across from Grant again, this time at a quiet booth inside an old barbecue joint in Fort Worth they both liked. It smelled like hickory and cornbread, and nobody there seemed to notice what either of them did for a living. You remember that day you got in trouble in 7th grade? She asked suddenly, picking at her baked beans. Which one? The incident with Mr. Hale came to mind. He accused you of plagiarism regarding your paper. Grant sighed. Yes, he recalled. You returned home holding that paper, visibly upset. Tears streamed down your face as you insisted you hadn't cheated. And he believed you. Yet, he still made you rewrite the entire paper. He chuckled. You said that rewriting something sometimes demonstrates its originality. She affirmed exactly. Grant turned to her. But that's what happened? Gloria replied negatively. It seemed this occasion required assistance from another. He paused, allowing the statement to resonate. Then she added, I didn't raise you to be rich, Grant. I raised you to be right. He glanced at her across the table, a palpable feeling just below the surface. I know, he responded. And sometimes, she continued, doing the right thing means you forfeit ease. You enter spaces that aren't welcoming. You voice your thoughts when silence would be simpler. And you visit the bank even when it feels demeaning. No matter the circumstance, it impacts those who care. He blinked once, twice, then smiled. You know, you really should speak at that meeting, she said. Oh, I will, Gloria replied. But I'm bringing my purse, my cane, and my full voice. No softening at this time. Grant laughed. You never softened it. You just made it sound kind. She grinned, then picked up her napkin and dabbed the corner of her mouth. Kind doesn't mean quiet. The situation didn't conclude there, as Gloria had further remarks. A community meeting took place 3 weeks later within a simple civic center located just off Lancaster Avenue. There were no special decorations and no filming crews were present. Instead, attendees found folding chairs, a podium, and a hand-painted sign that read, Listening Circle, Hillstone Federal Bank. Upon Gloria's arrival, the room was already half full, comprising both bank staff and customers. The gathering included older folks, young professionals, small business owners, and a few individuals she didn't recognize, presumably there to observe or report. She wore a cobalt blue blouse that highlighted the silver in her hair. She avoided flashy jewelry, opting for her usual pearl earrings, the same pair she wore to her granddaughter's graduation. Upon her arrival, the conversation quieted. People turned and heads lifted. Grant was seated near the front, but remained seated. He understood his mother didn't require an escort. Not on this day. When it was Gloria's time to address the gathering, she didn't immediately move to the podium. Instead, she positioned herself just beside it, close enough to be easily heard, but maintaining enough distance to make eye contact with everyone present without unnecessary ceremony. The room fell silent. She cleared her throat. I'm Gloria Hightower. I'm a retired school nurse. I've resided here for more than 40 years, and I'm a client of Hillstone Federal for almost 15 years. There were some nods, some quiet acknowledgments. I am here today because I was asked to recount my experience. However, this extends beyond what occurred that morning at the bank. That portion is straightforward. I experienced disrespectful treatment. I was questioned regarding a check bearing my name. I was made to feel out of place. This wasn't due to anything I said, nor was it due to anything I did. It was solely based on my appearance. Her voice remained steady. It didn't waver, but it resonated low, full, and unwavering. Initially, I wasn't angry. I felt pain. I was certain I had committed no wrongdoing. Nevertheless, someone deemed me questionable. Someone decided my dignity could be compromised. She paused, allowing those words to resonate. I intended to remain silent, simply contacting my son and waiting, calmly. However, I came to understand something later. People rely on silence when they behave in such a manner. They depend on our courtesy, our tolerance, our weariness. But occasionally, the most honorable course of action is to object. A hush fell over the room. My intention isn't to damage anyone's professional standing. This isn't about retribution. It's about achieving change. Not for my benefit. I am 73 years old and possess a sufficient understanding of the world. But for the individual who next enters a bank with trust and departs feeling diminished. A man positioned towards the rear dabbed at his eye. A woman seated across the aisle gripped her notepad without putting pen to paper. Gloria rested her hands in her lap. We reside in a nation that frequently discusses principles of equity, regarding values, regarding treating everyone equally. But those ideas hold no substance unless they manifest in everyday interactions. At the checkout, during phone calls, in the way we address someone who appears different. She glanced at Grant briefly. He offered no smile. He offered no nod. He simply observed her the way one observes a fire that warms and humbles simultaneously. Thank you for listening, she said, then stepped back without fanfare. The room did not erupt in applause. It did not require it. A few hands clapped gently. A few heads bowed. But what lingered was heavier than noise. It was reflection. After the meeting, people lined up, not for handshakes or photos, but to talk, to share. One woman said she'd experienced the same thing at a different branch. A young man said it reminded him of the way his grandmother used to be followed around stores. And the bank staff, well, most of them just said thank you, with eyes that conveyed more than their words. That night, while Gloria sat in her kitchen with tea in hand, Grant texted her, "You were incredible." She responded slowly, "They'll remember that." She continued, "I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it so they remember each other." He summoned her to publicly shame her before his affluent guests. However, when she placed her hands on the piano, the room became utterly silent. Savannah heat operates without fairness in July. The air was dense and heavy, clinging to skin and making clothing feel burdensome. Beverly Gaines stood near the wrought iron gate of 742 Prospect Lane, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and a subtle moment of uncertainty in her chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anxiety, just a brief pause. A moment of stillness before entering another person's space. She hadn't anticipated employment in a residence of that nature. Not at this point in her life. 48 years old, no children, no husband. Just a one-bedroom apartment near Chatham Square and a voice that still occasionally sang in her sleep. But when her job at the dry cleaners closed unexpectedly, Beverly understood the urgency. Rent, it wouldn't wait. Upon the agency's call inquiring about her availability for a private client cleaning, she immediately accepted before they completed their request. The Whitlow estate embodied the expected grandeur of established Southern wealth. White columns, a wraparound porch, and boxwood hedges meticulously trimmed. It was a place of such refinement that even the birds seemed to move with a subdued grace. She proceeded up the steps, rang the bell, and the door opened with almost immediate responsiveness. "You're punctual," the house manager stated, looking at her clipboard without offering a smile. That was already an improvement over the previous employee. Beverly didn't take it as a slight. She rarely did. It was necessary if you wanted to retain employment in another person's home. You smile, you nod, you blend into the surroundings. The initial weeks passed without incident. She cleaned tile, shined silver, and discovered the location of every control and concealed item. She avoided drawing attention to herself, responding only when addressed, and always using sir or mom. Mr. Whitlow paid her little regard, preoccupied with entertaining lawyers, business associates, or women in high heels, all of whom departed before breakfast. Her presence wasn't meant to be acknowledged. However, one afternoon, while dusting the second-floor hallway, she stopped near the music room. The room was unoccupied, but the grand piano stood prominently, like a centerpiece in a deserted banquet hall. An itch in her hand, akin to muscle memory, prompted her movement. She entered, closing the door softly, and settled down briefly. The keys felt smooth, not new, but carefully maintained. She played a single note, then another, and a recognizable tune emerged, a childhood melody, her mother's preferred gospel hymn. Just a few measures were played, gentle and slow. She didn't notice the approaching footsteps until the final note faded. "You're aware that task isn't included in your duties, correct?" Beverly abruptly stood, as if discovered in wrongdoing. Mr. Whitlow rested against the doorframe, holding a wine glass and smiling knowingly. He was a man who rarely posed a question without already possessing the answer. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean you play," he interjected. She glanced downward slightly. "When I was young," he tilted his head, as if she'd made a comical remark. Who would have thought? And then he departed. Beverly made no further reference to the incident, deciding she had likely tested her fortune. She was unaware that that instance had already initiated something within his thoughts, something he would utilize subsequently, not to commend her, but to exhibit her. Charles Whitlow never needed to strive for charm. He carried it as a second skin, polished, rehearsed, and just artificial enough to be hazardous. At 56, he appeared precisely the Southern gentleman he feigned to be. Linen suits during the summer, costly shoes designed for standing, not walking. His smile could market falsehoods without hesitation. Beneath the outward appearance of success, a sense of decay existed that primarily concerned the staff. To the public, he presented himself as a philanthropist, organizing fundraisers for the arts, contributing to schools, and hosting annual garden parties that garnered attention in the society pages. He engaged in public appearances, shaking hands with judges and interacting with people at political events, creating the impression of a political aspiration, despite never explicitly stating his intentions. Within the house, however, Charles maintained control through ridicule. The assistance was readily available, and he valued wielding it to discomfort others. Beverly recognized this tendency from the start. He rarely shouted or raised his voice, yet possessed a remarkable ability to diminish people's sense of self without physical contact. For instance, he once inquired of the new chef if his sophisticated California training encompassed the ability to prepare acceptable grits while serving 20 guests. On another occasion, he observed a gardener stooping to retrieve a dropped rose and remarked, "Careful now, could send you back to minimum wage." No one challenged him. No one offered a correction. He was Charles Whitlow. In this town, his reputation commanded respect. Even the legal authorities didn't always question his pronouncements. Beverly attempted to avoid him, but that wasn't always feasible. He began to probe her. Initially, these were minor comments. Gaines, he stated one morning while preparing breakfast. Have you ever worn anything other than beige? Later, while enjoying bourbon on the porch. You seem very quiet. Do you ever speak, or do you simply move about like a phantom? She did not respond to his attempt at conversation. She continued working. Then one evening, as she walked through the foyer carrying polished silver, he spoke to her. Are you still playing those piano keys when no one is present? Beverly hesitated. No, sir. He smiled, appearing skeptical. That must be amusing. She departed, feeling constricted in her throat, but maintaining a steady composure. Afterward, the other staff members cautioned her concerning him. That man's a snake, muttered Harold, the groundskeeper. He feeds on weakness. Don't let him find yours. But Whitlow didn't need to dig. He already had what he wanted. 2 weeks later, invitations started going out for his summer garden party. Beverly overheard the details while changing linens upstairs. It was going to be a large event. Close to 100 guests were expected, with live jazz music and wine flown in from Napa. The staff doubled for the weekend. Every room was scrubbed spotless. Everything had to be perfect. She had experience with large-scale events. The demands didn't bother her. Provided no one focused their attention on her for too long, she could handle it. However, Whitlow had different intentions. The night preceding the party, he intercepted her in the hallway. You know, he stated, tomorrow could be your opportunity. She regarded him with confusion. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Don't be taken aback if I request you perform for the audience. Just a brief distraction. It might be enjoyable. Her stomach tightened. I would prefer not to, sir. He lifted an eyebrow. Fortunately, I wasn't seeking a request, and so the decision was made swiftly. She found no rest that night, not due to worry about humiliation, but because she understood his intentions precisely. He desired a display, and she was uncertain whether to provide it or deny it. By noon the following day, the Whitlow estate no longer resembled a home. It appeared like a performance stage. White tents were erected over the manicured lawn. Cream linen draped the tables, shimmering beneath centerpieces of fresh orchids and color lilies. Jazz musicians tuned their instruments on the terrace. Uniformed staff moved with precision, pouring wine, adjusting placements, and folding napkins with the artistry of origami. Beverly kept her head down, as was her habit. She arranged canapes, assisted in polishing stemware, and patrolled the perimeter with a tray of cucumber water and melting ice cubes. No one made eye contact with her. She didn't object. The feeling of being unseen offered comfort, a sense of security. However, her hands trembled. The source of her anxiety wasn't the piano itself. It was the underlying motive. She was certain Whitlow wasn't offering her a genuine opportunity. He was orchestrating a joke, and she was the target. As the clock reached 4 p.m., the attendees began to arrive. Real estate developers, local judges, business owners, art patrons, and women displaying polished smiles. They flowed in, embracing, laughing, enjoying drinks, and casually mentioning names. From the shade of the veranda, Beverly observed them move across the lawn as if they were born on polished marble. She fell out of place here. Not among these people. Not in this house. Not even in this city some days. But she wasn't here to fit in. She was here to serve. By 615, the band had paused, and Charles Whitlow was feeling confident. 2 glasses of red wine in and a dozen compliments later, he strolled to the center of the lawn and raised his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice strong enough to draw attention from everyone. Before dinner is served, I thought we'd enjoy a brief, unexpected entertainment. Beverly paused. Her tray shifted a little. Some guests applauded quietly. Others glanced around, seemingly puzzled. Whitlow proceeded, his smile constrained. It turns out one of our staff members possesses a hidden talent. Beverly? People looked over. She remained still. He waved expansively toward the open French doors leading to the music room. Someone suggested I play something, recalling I occasionally play the piano. A few laughs rippled through the room, a gentle amusement typical of those accustomed to wealth and charmed by unexpected moments. Applause and quiet whispers followed. Beverly paused, experiencing the uncomfortable feeling of deciding between declining and complying. Yet, she didn't retreat. She gave her tray to a server, dried her hands on her apron, and entered the building. The guests followed, now filled with curiosity. Within the music room, the grand piano was positioned under gentle lighting, appearing as if it had been awaiting attention all day. Beverly settled onto the bench, her posture upright, her heart racing. A profound silence descended upon the room. Charles leaned against the doorway, holding a glass, looking as confident as always. Whenever you're ready, she observed the keys. They remained still. Her fingers paused above them. The room anticipated something other than music. They expected a jest, a hesitant melody, a discordant note, a source of amusement for later, a way to diminish her. However, Beverly's musical journey didn't begin with jazz, gospel, or any extravagant style. It started with a lullaby her mother would hum, a simple sequence of just 5 notes, as gentle as a whisper. From there, she expanded upon it. Her hands moved deliberately, as if awakening something. Minor chords softened into major ones. Gospel rhythms subtly infiltrated classical phrasing. Jazz embellishments playfully highlighted each shift. The room fell silent. An awkward silence descended, not born of courtesy, but from a shared lack of words. One woman murmured, "Is this staged?" Another, her champagne flute suspended in the air, paused, forgetting to drink. Beverly remained unseeing, her playing as if transported to a different place, a sanctuary, a cherished memory. And Whitlow, still positioned near the door, had lost his smile. Not because of a thwarted scheme, but because of a sudden understanding. She hadn't been the object of ridicule. He had. There are instances in life when time seems to halt. The room, filled with costly timepieces and carefully crafted smiles, remained utterly still as Beverly Gaines infused each note with fragments of her history. Her performance wasn't intended to create an impression, nor was it directed at the mother. She played because for the initial time in several years, no one was dictating her identity. Her fingers moved confidently, not with uncertainty, but with profound, unspoken conviction. Not ostentatious, not rapid, simply genuine. Her left hand maintained the rhythm, consistently, like a quiet inhalation. Her right hand conveyed the narrative. A range of emotions resonated within the music: sorrow, defiance, and a subdued joy that constricted the chest. Even those unfamiliar with music sensed an internal resonance. The sole presence was the music itself. There are no sounds of silverware, no ringing phones, no hushed conversations. Just her, the piano, and 100 people holding their breath. In the corner, the band's saxophonist set down his drink and leaned forward, his jaw slightly parted. Across the room, a woman, visibly upset, murmured to her husband, "She's playing Duke Ellington." She then asked, "But that transition, did you notice it?" That was gospel. Beverly hadn't registered any of it. Instead, she recalled the sound of footsteps from 20 years prior, her mother pacing in their small kitchen in Tallahassee, humming while stirring beans over a low flame. She remembered the cracked metronome resting on top of her childhood piano. She recalled the tremor in her mother's hands near the end, yet she never missed a beat when playing. She recalled abandoning music the day following her mother's passing. She remembered storing it away, similar to a sweater that was outgrown, until today. Today, she allowed it to return. The concluding notes were subdued, lacking drama or spectacle, simply resonant. Like a statement finished because it felt whole, followed by silence. Not uncomfortable, not bewildered, but deeply respectful. Then applause arose. It began with a single person, an elderly man positioned at the rear, clapping deliberately, his gaze unfocused. Subsequently, another joined in. Then, the entire room rose to their feet. It wasn't driven by a sense of courtesy, but by the involuntary movement of their limbs. Beverly rose from a bench. Her hands now shook, not due to anxiety, but due to a different sensation. A feeling she hadn't experienced in years: relief. For the first time, the room regarded her not as a servant, not as an extra, but as someone who'd offered them something genuine. Someone quietly asked, "Who is she?" Beverly made no reply. She merely moved away from the piano and offered a slight nod. She didn't look at anyone and walked toward the hallway. Someone blocked her path. It was Ava Renfield, a local arts patron known for curating talent across the South. She stepped forward, stunned. "That was remarkable. Do you play professionally?" "No, ma'am," Beverly replied, lowering her eyes. "Were you trained?" Beverly paused. "A long time ago," Ava said, blinking. "Well, wherever it was, they should have built a stage around you." Others gathered. One guest asked if she taught lessons. Another offered her a card. A woman, her voice full of genuine feeling, stated, "You made me feel something I haven't felt in years." Whitlow remained still, positioned close to the French doors, his smile absent. His gaze focused on Beverly, but it wasn't playful. It held something different. Could it be embarrassment? Possibly. Yet it appeared to be a pride he would never be able to acknowledge. Beverly didn't pause for his response. She had already given him more than he warranted, and retrieved something she believed she had permanently laid to rest. Outside, the party had resumed. Waiters replenished champagne flutes. The jazz band resumed playing on the terrace, but an alteration was perceptible, as if the tempo had altered. It was as if Beverly's music hadn't fully departed, but resonated within people, close to their hearts. Inside, Beverly had moved to the kitchen. She sought no fanfare. She desired no accolades. She simply needed to breathe. She rested against the counter, gazing at the floor, her apron still fastened. A few minutes elapsed. Harold, the groundskeeper, entered the room. He remained mostly silent, offering only a quiet whistle and crossing his arms. "You certainly know how to bruise a wealthy man's pride," he commented, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Beverly managed a faint chuckle, though it didn't reflect in her eyes. "I wasn't intending to do anything," she said. "That's precisely why it was so effective," he responded. She poured herself a glass of water. Her hands had become more stable, but her heart still raced. Harold departed shortly afterward. He preferred brevity, and Beverly valued that. Shortly thereafter, Charles Whitlow entered the kitchen. She didn't acknowledge him with a turn of her head. She didn't need to. He placed his glass down with unnecessary force. "You certainly made an impact," he remarked. Beverly remained silent. "I envisioned a brief, amusing exchange," he continued. "I didn't anticipate it evolving into a performance." Still, she offered no reply. He rested against the counter next to her. "Do you know what people are discussing?" "I'm harboring a talent within my own home. It feels as though I'm a character in a television drama." She made contact with his eyes, a look of composure and clarity. "You didn't conceal me. You simply didn't observe." His jaw moved slightly, a single twitch. "You believe you humiliated me?" "No, sir," she replied gently. "You accomplished that entirely on your own." He looked at her for a brief moment, then turned and departed. The subsequent day, telephone calls began. A representative from the Arts Council and a local music school inquired if she would contemplate offering a master class. A former producer received an invitation from a retired colleague for lunch. The experience felt dreamlike. People who had previously ignored her now regarded her differently. Beverly, however, did not respond to most of the calls immediately. She completed her scheduled responsibilities for the week, as was her routine. This included cleaning the floors, folding the laundry, and polishing the silver. Yet, a shift was evident in her movements. She no longer seemed to be attempting to remain unnoticed. That Friday afternoon, she entered Whitlow's office and submitted her resignation. 2 weeks. There was no explanation offered. He didn't request one. He simply nodded, examined the paper for a moment longer than necessary, and responded, "Fine." She prepared to leave. "You'll be back," he called after her. "They always come back," she replied, pausing in the doorway. "Perhaps, but not to you." Beyond the window, the wind rustled the garden hedges. Visitors would arrive and depart. The staff would be changed, and the gatherings would proceed. Yet, the recollection of that afternoon would linger. The issue wasn't the piano. It was the fact that the woman he attempted to control had subtly reminded everyone she wasn't under his authority, a mark he couldn't erase. Beverly Gaines, however, didn't seek retribution. She wasn't pursuing acknowledgement. She was at long last moving towards something positive, and it wasn't Charles Whitlow's house. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Beverly Gaines exited 742 Prospect Lane for the last time. There was no elaborate farewell, no presents, and no remarks from Charles Whitlow. The only sound was the creak of the iron gate as she closed it behind her, and the sun felt pleasant on her shoulders as she walked into the street. She still held the same canvas bag she had carried that first day. But she had changed, not because of the comments from the guests, the applause, or the unexpected attention to her talent. Those things had never truly been important to her. What mattered was that she had recalled who she was, and she wouldn't allow anyone to suppress that again. Returning to her apartment, she retrieved an old box from the back of her closet. It contained yellowing sheet music, a chipped metronome, a stack of journals from her early 20s, and a photo of her mother sitting at an upright piano. Eyes closed, hands mid-chord. That night, Beverly played until the neighbors knocked on the wall. She played every song she hadn't let herself touch in years. Pieces she thought she'd forgotten came back with ease. She navigated these experiences with amusement, albeit quietly and openly. Following a week of evenings dedicated to intensive work and mornings spent in quiet thought, she arrived at a resolution. She contacted the Arts Council again, and then the music school. She even responded to a call from a woman who wished to write a profile on her for a regional magazine. One by one, she reestablished contact. Not for recognition, not for praise, but because perhaps her talent could still be of use. After 2 months had passed, Beverly was providing piano lessons twice a week at a community center in Garden City. The majority of her students were children from working-class homes, along with a few adults, women who had always desired to play, but hadn't previously had the opportunity. She was patient, direct, and kind. She never discussed Charles Whitlow, nor did she mention the party. However, information spread. Following a lesson one day, a girl named Nia, who was just under 10 years old and full of energy, glanced up from the piano keys and inquired, "Miss Beverly, did you truly work as a maid at that large house on Prospect Lane?" Beverly smiled. "I did," she responded. "Did they require you to play music?" "No, dear," she replied softly. "They attempted to humiliate me, but I determined what they would receive." Nia seemed puzzled for a moment. Then she smiled. "You're quite well known now," Beverly laughed. "I'm simply someone who recalled her identity." It was a feeling surpassing fame. She walked home that day, her shoulders squared and her head held high. This wasn't due to arrogance, but because she no longer bore any burden. Behind her, Charles Whitlow continued to host gatherings. However, news had circulated regarding the events of that summer evening. People recalled how Beverly played, the ensuing stillness, and how a room overflowing with wealth couldn't affect a woman who had nothing to validate. Some suggested Whitlow had altered since that time. Subtly, he consumed more alcohol and smiled less. Several familiar patrons ceased their visits. However, Beverly gave no consideration to these absences. She had music to instruct, pupils to motivate, and a life that was now entirely her own. Few individuals receive an opportunity to reclaim aspects of themselves they had previously relinquished. But occasionally, if one remains silent for a sufficient duration, the world presents a chance to speak with emphasis. And Beverly utilized hers with poise. For influence isn't always embodied by the most prominent voice present. It can feel like an unexpected melody, leaving people questioning why they ever had reservations about you. If you've ever experienced being underestimated, overlooked, or told you possessed less potential than you truly do, recall Beverly Gaines. And when your opportunity arrives, embrace it as if it were destined for you. Remember to subscribe for further stories of this nature. After a black woman CEO experienced denial of service at her bank, she maintained composure. Within 5 minutes, the manager responsible for the incident was terminated. The errand was intended to be brief, approximately 10 to 15 minutes, a task easily managed between scheduled meetings. That morning, Nadira Langston, aged 48, the head of a multi-million-dollar tech firm located in Phoenix, Arizona, exited her driver's black Lincoln, and entered Sycamore First Bank, carrying her company's banking portfolio carefully. She was unhurried. There was no need for haste. Her schedule had been completely free to allow her to complete the transfer of a substantial business account, which was one of several her company had been relocating for months. The account manager she typically collaborated with had retired, and today she was meeting the new team in person to finalize the documents. A simple, standard procedure. Her navy blue suit was expertly tailored. Her hair was styled in a neat, low bun, and she wore diamond studs in her ears. Understated, yet refined. Her heels made no clicking sound as she moved. They barely rustled. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had held a position of authority for a significant period and no longer felt the need to demonstrate it. Approaching the reception desk, she provided her name, Nadira Langston. She explained she was there to meet with someone from the commercial accounts department. The young woman at the counter glanced up, briefly nodding while entering information into the system. Okay, just a moment. It was then that things began. A woman, appearing to be in her mid-50s, with pale blonde hair and a rigid posture, emerged from a nearby glass office and walked over, offering a smile that seemed strained. "Can I help you with something?" she inquired. Her voice was concise. Nadira turned and offered her hand. "Yes, thank you. I'm Nadira Langston. I understand I'm scheduled to meet with someone from the business team. I'm completing a transfer." The woman didn't return the handshake. She looked at the folder Nadira held. "And you are representing which company?" "I'm the CEO of Bluestone Dynamics." The account was previously managed by Peter Larson before his retirement. The manager raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "And you're here, unaccompanied?" "Yes," Nadira responded calmly. "It's a private matter." A pause followed, one of those pauses that conveys more than a complete sentence, the kind where judgment is disguised as confusion. "Right?" the woman said, adjusting her position. "We generally don't permit walk-ins for high-tier accounts unless it has been arranged beforehand." Nadira stated, still calm. She retrieved the confirmation email. "Here's the appointment confirmation from your internal scheduler. Today, 9:30 a.m. The woman looked at the document, then back at Nadira. "Are you certain this wasn't intended for another employee at your organization?" Nadira blinked, deliberately and slowly. "I operate the company." A brief silence followed. "My name is Cheryl Bainbridge. I'm the branch manager. We're dealing with some concerning events lately. Individuals have been falsely presenting their credentials to gain access to valuable accounts. You appreciate the seriousness of this, I'm sure." Nadira fully grasped the situation. "Cheryl, is it?" she replied, her tone remaining calm and measured. "Offering my license, corporate ID, and the transaction papers I'm here to approve?" Cheryl's smile became strained. "It's simply procedure, Ms. Langston. Please don't view it as directed at you." Nadira had encountered that phrase on countless occasions, in numerous boardrooms, airport lounges, and hotel lobbies. However, before she could add anything, Cheryl motioned to the receptionist. "Could you please contact security?" Just to err on the side of caution. It was necessary to confirm her statements. Nadira's mouth remained still. Her tone remained consistent. "Are you summoning security?" she asked. "On the CEO of one of our most important prospective clients?" Cheryl's shoulders became even more rigid. "I didn't suggest that," I replied. "I simply stated we needed to verify." At that moment, a subtle change occurred within the room. A quiet hum arose from a man seated in the waiting area. A brief look passed between two tellers positioned behind the counter. A palpable shift occurred. It was evident Nadira had followed every procedure correctly, yet she was still being made to feel like an outsider. Nadira, however, was not prepared to accept the situation. Not this time. The bank lobby wasn't crowded, but sufficient people were present to observe the unfolding events. An older man, waiting in line, moved uncomfortably. A woman seated close to the loan office took out her phone, feigning a check of her email, but her gaze remained fixed on Nadira and Cheryl. The security guard was not yet present, but Cheryl remained steadfast, as if anticipating immediate reinforcement. Nadira carefully opened her folder. It contained all necessary documentation to confirm her identity: business cards, certified articles of incorporation, 2 forms of identification, and the bank's own records confirming the account transfer. She arranged them on the reception desk methodically, similar to a card dealer. Composed. Accurate. Here, she stated, that is my Arizona state ID. This document confirms my company's EIN. It includes the board resolution authorizing me as the account signer. In this, she indicated the final sheet is your bank's welcome letter. Cheryl briefly reviewed the papers. Anyone can print documents, she stated, crossing her arms. I've worked in banking for 27 years. I've seen people pretend to be CFOs, consultants, even heirs to estates. We don't make exceptions just because someone claims they're important. Nadira's tone remained steady, but her eyes narrowed. So this isn't about the paperwork. It's about how I appear, correct? Cheryl let out a dismissive sound. I beg your pardon. You heard me. If I presented myself as a 55-year-old man in a Brooks Brothers suit, you'd be extending a handshake and offering coffee. Ma'am, please reduce your voice volume. Nadira responded. My voice is already subdued, her words sharp and clear. I am the CEO. You have reviewed the documents. You know my name. The only thing that seemed to register was that I wasn't what they anticipated. A silence followed. A protracted, uncomfortable silence, and then Cheryl spoke. It wasn't a shout, but it carried. You just don't look like a CEO? The statement lingered, heavy as smoke after a match. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person murmured, did she really just say that? The receptionist stood motionless behind the desk. She appeared to wish she could simply vanish. Nadira's eyelids lowered deliberately, yet her voice remained steady. I have secured more than $80 million in venture capital. I have spearheaded 3 product launches. I have presented as a keynote speaker at CES and finalized agreements in 6 countries. I don't need to appear any particular way to be completely myself. Cheryl began to respond. However, before she could, Nadira shifted slightly and asked the receptionist, is there a regional director assigned to this branch? The young woman nodded hesitantly. He is present today, in fact. It's a surprise audit. He's in the back conference room. Nadira's lips formed a slight smile. Excellent. I wish to speak with him. Then, Cheryl intervened once more, visibly agitated. There's no necessity for that. I am capable of managing this. Let's avoid making the situation worse. Nadira faced her directly. You have already worsened this. You summoned security. You rejected every form of identification I presented. You challenged my position, my firm, and my credibility, all without initiating a single phone call to confirm any detail. Therefore, no, you're not capable of handling this. The room fell silent. The receptionist lifted the phone and initiated a call to an internal extension. Mr. Dorsey? She inquired. There is someone present requesting to speak with you. Her name is Nadira Langston from Bluestone Dynamics. A brief hesitation. Yes. All right. I will inform him. She ended the call and turned to Nadira, her eyes displaying surprise. He is on his way out now. Meanwhile, Cheryl remained unaware of the significant misjudgment she had made. The door situated at the rear of the bank swung open, and a tall man, dressed in a charcoal suit, emerged. He moved with a brisk, purposeful stride, alert but not hurried. He held a slim leather tablet and wore an expression suggesting displeasure at being interrupted from meetings. However, his expression softened immediately when he saw Nadira. Nadira Langston, he said, extending his hand. She shook it firmly. Yes, you must be Mr. Dorsey. He continued, Matthew Dorsey, Regional Director. I've heard a lot about you. Peter spoke very highly before he retired. We appreciate the opportunity to manage your accounts. Cheryl's mouth parted slightly, and her face paled. Matthew turned to her, appearing puzzled. Did something go wrong with the meeting? Cheryl struggled to find the right words. Yes, there was. I simply verified the credentials before providing access to the commercial suite. This follows our standard procedure. Nadira remained silent. She didn't need to. The receptionist, still positioned behind the counter, added cautiously. She contacted security, sir. She stated that we were unable to verify the client's identity. Matthew blinked. You contacted security? Regarding Ms. Langston? I was attempting to adhere to established procedures. Cheryl responded promptly. We've experienced individuals recently presenting fabricated business credentials. I prefer not to assume any risks. You understand how crucial our commercial accounts are. He gave her a direct look. Yes, I am aware. This is why we verify credentials, rather than form assessments of clients based on subjective impressions. Cheryl's shoulders tightened. Excuse me? She began. I've reviewed the compliance logs. You didn't even access the file she presented. You disregarded the scheduled appointment. You dismissed the identification. I was safeguarding the bank, she asserted. You embarrassed the bank, Matthew retorted. You've publicly humiliated one of the most significant clients we've on board this year. In view of customers, in view of staff, with no justification. A security guard finally arrived at the front entrance, his radio clipped to his belt, meticulously scanning the room, as if anticipating trouble. Matthew dismissed him with a wave. Everything's fine here, Eric, Cheryl repeated, her voice now trembling. False alarm. She had entered alone. Her name wasn't on the standard schedule. It was on the revised internal schedule, the one your assistant oversees. The same schedule you approve every Monday morning. You simply didn't review it, Nadira stated, stepping forward slightly, her voice low but clear. You hadn't acted without delay because of an absence. You paused because I didn't align with your preconceived notion of who should possess such authority. Matthew remained silent, allowing the quiet to linger. There was nothing further to elaborate on. Cheryl's mouth opened once more, but she spoke no words. Ms. Langston, Matthew stated, pivoting with a return to decorum. Would you be willing to accompany me? I will personally oversee your transaction from my office. Nadira acknowledged with a single nod. Certainly. They started to leave, passing the lines of desks and glass-walled offices. Cheryl stayed still by the front desk, her eyes wide, her face unreadable. No one moved towards her. The receptionist looked at her keyboard. The security guard walked away slowly, seeming unsure of what to do. Just as they were about to vanish down the hallway, Matthew halted and turned. Cheryl looked up, clearly surprised. My office. After this meeting, we'll be discussing your role here in detail. He didn't raise his voice. Wasn't necessary. However, Cheryl already sensed a change in the atmosphere. Matthew's office presented a crisp, though understated, impression. It featured clean lines, 2 chairs positioned across from his desk, and a tall window allowing morning light to spread across the carpet. Nadira waited until he invited her to sit, and even then, she maintained a straight posture and a composed demeanor. He closed the door softly, then turned back to face her. Ms. Langston, I want to apologize for what just happened. That should not have occurred. Not here. Not anywhere. You were treated unfairly, Nadira stated calmly, placing her folder on the desk. However, this isn't the first time. It probably won't be the last, Matthew responded, leaning against the edge of his desk. We have protocol for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening. Cheryl disregarded every step. She didn't just disregard protocol, Nadira said. She formed an opinion of me immediately upon seeing my face. Matthew breathed out his nose, crossing his arms. I acknowledged that. He resumed looking at the documents she had placed before him, reviewing them without speaking. He wasn't hurried. He was carefully considering everything. Everything is in the correct order, he stated. I never questioned it. However, I do want to inquire. Did she allow you any opportunity to provide an explanation before summoning security? Not really, Nadira responded. She recognized my name, saw my face, and heard my title, yet still inquired if the appointment belonged to another person. Matthew rubbed his jaw. That will present a challenge for her. A significant one. Nadira inclined her head. I didn't intend for anyone to lose their job. I am aware of that. However, sometimes repercussions are deserved. Immediately, his office phone vibrated. He answered, listened briefly, then instructed, send her in. A knock followed shortly, and Cheryl entered. The usual assuredness had vanished. Her face was pale, her shoulders slightly hunched. She walked as if unsure how to position her hands or where to look. Ms. Langston, she began, her voice quiet. I owe you an apology. I was mistaken. That wasn't my goal. You don't have to pretend, Nadira stated, interrupting. Her voice wasn't harsh, only resolute. You acted precisely as you did. You didn't believe I was who I claimed to be. And instead of verifying, you chose to embarrass me. Cheryl looked to Matthew, visibly wanting him to intervene. He remained silent. I've spent over 2 decades in this field. She continued, I've witnessed fraud, identity theft, all sorts of deception. And none of that pertains to me, Nadira stated. You didn't err due to caution. You err because you believed you could evade detection, Matthew finally said. Cheryl, following a review of events this morning, encompassing internal audit records and client appointment logs, I have decided to end your employment, effective immediately. Cheryl blinked. End? Are you serious? Yes, I am, Matthew replied. You breached client protocol, showed disrespect to one of our most valuable account holders, and created a public disturbance that jeopardized the bank's reputation. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern, and it concludes here. She appeared ready to retaliate, but the atmosphere offered no space for her to exert herself. She faced Nadira. I didn't intend to cause you any personal offense, she said. You didn't offend me, Nadira replied softly. You showed disrespect. There's a distinction. Cheryl lowered her gaze, then pivoted, exited the doorway, and left it slightly open. Matthew remained still for a moment. Subsequently, he settled into his desk chair and raised his head. I trust that achieves a degree of responsibility. This is a beginning, Nadira responded. However, beyond the confines of that office, the narrative was quickly moving away from the bank. Information doesn't spread rapidly within a bank, except when a significant event occurs. And what unfolded that morning at Sycamore was not merely significant, it was irrefutable. As Nadira and Matthew left the office, the ambience in the lobby had fundamentally changed. Patrons remained silent. Tellers murmured behind their workstations. Cheryl's absence was more pronounced than her presence had ever been. The nameplate had already been taken from the front glass office, as if she had never worked there. Matthew walked Nadira out personally. I'll ensure the rest of the paperwork is managed by someone capable, he said. You shouldn't have to experience this level of absurdity. Ever. Nadira nodded. Accepting the folder, he returned to her. The paperwork is the straightforward part, she replied. He gave a quiet, respectful laugh. Indeed, they arrived at the front doors, where 2 customers graciously held them open. A teller rose from behind the counter and offered a small wave, hesitant yet genuine. The sun was ascending higher above Phoenix. The air was dry, and the pavement was warm. Nadira hesitated close to the curb, her driver advancing, the car door already ajar. She glanced back at Matthew. A statement you made in your office resonated with me, that occasionally consequences are deserved. He affirmed this with a nod. Yes, I agree, she stated, but repercussions lacking comprehension do little to affect change. Matthew lifted his eyebrows, showing interest. I don't want Cheryl to experience hardship, Nadira proceeded. I need people to understand this wasn't about me. This occurs for Black professionals, particularly women, on a daily basis. It happens at airports, restaurants, stores, and meetings. And frequently, no one faces termination. They're simply disregarded. Again and again, he remained silent. He allowed her to continue. Perhaps for the first time, someone like him genuinely listened. If the bank is to address this with seriousness, she stated, refrain from simply publishing a statement online. Avoid issuing a standard apology. Initiate a dialogue. Instruct your managers regarding the oversights made. Prevent this from recurring for the next woman who enters that establishment. Matthew inhaled deeply, his posture now slightly more burdened. You are correct. I am unable to reverse the events that transpired. However, I can ensure they contribute to a positive outcome. That's the true measure, isn't it? Nadira responded. Not what one accomplishes with an audience, but what one alters when unobserved. She entered the vehicle, and the door closed behind her. The interior was quiet, but the silence felt clean. Her driver glanced back through the mirror. Everything satisfactory, Ms. Langston? She looked at her hands, then out the window at the glass facade of the bank. Cheryl had resolved to ignore her. The crucial decision, the one that would have significant impact, had already been made by someone else. Yes, it has, she said softly. Nadira didn't know that within 24 hours the entire country would be discussing what transpired inside that branch. It began with a tweet, just a few lines from someone who had been sitting near the loan officer's desk that morning. Just witnessed a black woman CEO get denied service at her own bank. She remained composed, publicly addressed the bias, and the manager was terminated immediately. I don't know her name, but I won't forget her demeanor. By lunchtime, the tweet had surpassed 40,000 likes. By evening, it appeared on Instagram, then Facebook, and subsequently on local news. A local blogger identified Nadira's name by comparing information with a press release Bluestone Dynamics released earlier that month. A Phoenix reporter verified the information with the bank. By nightfall, Nadira Langston was trending across the nation. She made no public statements. Wasn't necessary. Others shared their experiences. LinkedIn was filled with accolades. Corporate professionals, frequently black women, recounted similar situations, being questioned at the valet of their own office buildings, asked to show ID 3 times before boarding first-class flights, being addressed as sweetie, even while leading negotiations worth millions. People described Nadira as graceful, resilient, and composed. However, those who understood the situation better explained that it was more than grace. It was a matter of survival. Simultaneously, Sycamore First corporate headquarters mobilized. Within 24 hours, they issued a statement recognizing the incident, confirming Cheryl Bainbridge's departure from employment, and affirming the company's dedication to equity and continued training. This response proved insufficient for the public. Numerous comments appeared, questioning how many other Cheryls remain working in your branches. And do your executives grasp that implicit bias training cannot address issues permitted by your hiring processes? Black women should not be expected to remain composed when facing disrespect. Nadira made no public statements regarding the situation until 3 days later when she consented to an interview on a podcast hosted by a longtime friend and business strategist, Leona Bates. They faced each other in a silent studio in Tempe, with microphones activated and without any prepared notes. Leona began softly, asking, "You've remained silent while the internet has erupted. What prompted this response now?" Nadira answered, "Because the matter is no longer about me." Leona focused on what this situation highlighted. Specifically, that despite possessing the correct titles, documents, and credentials, people still perceive you as an outsider. Speaking out is then labeled as causing a disturbance, while remaining quiet is interpreted as agreement. It's a draining predicament, regardless of the choice. They discussed the matter for almost an hour, extending beyond the bank to address the significant emotional burden of maneuvering within established hierarchies while burdened by long-standing prejudices. Nadira remained composed. She didn't express sadness or frustration. Instead, she simply stated the facts, clearly, steadily, and without question. Following the broadcast, a fresh surge of interest emerged. This interest was authentic, thoughtful, and not superficial. Fellow CEOs contacted her. Business publications featured the narrative. A headline declared, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar." Nevertheless, Nadira maintained a grounded perspective. She did not desire recognition. She sought transformation, and she understood that meaningful change rarely appears in news headlines. The bias appeared in hiring practices, policy decisions, and even in determining who was initially believed. Even after the initial news coverage faded and the events became part of collective memory, those who witnessed her that morning at the bank still remembered what they saw. A few weeks later, Nadira addressed a room full of college students at Arizona State University. She had not intended to give any public speeches that season, as her schedule was already very full. When a business ethics professor contacted her and requested a conversation with her class, she readily agreed. The event was understated. There were no stage lights or press coverage, just 40 students, some taking notes in notebooks, others using laptops, eager to hear from the woman whose experience transformed a regular bank visit into a nationwide conversation. She presented no slides. There was no podium. She simply walked to the room's front, paused, and began speaking. "I won't be telling a storybook narrative," she stated. "I won't be suggesting that if you labor diligently, no one will challenge you, because that isn't invariably accurate." The room fell silent, all attentive. You can possess the title, the suit, the contracts, the track record, and still be informed that you don't belong, not due to any failings on your part, but because someone else cannot envision your triumph without a face resembling their own. She surveyed the room. Her voice remained gentle, but each word resonated. And in those moments, a choice presents itself. Do you contract to ease their discomfort, or do you maintain your full presence, even if it creates tension in the space? A young man seated in the front row raised his hand. He asked, "How did you manage to remain composed during that experience? Weren't you feeling anger?" Nadira responded with a slow nod. "Naturally, I was. But anger is only valuable if you understand how to channel it. That day, I employed it to remain grounded. I employed that tactic to ensure she couldn't dismiss me without looking me in the eye while doing it." Another hand then rose, this time from a young woman. "What advice would you offer someone just beginning, who hasn't developed a resume like yours?" Nadira hesitated. "Recognize your value before anyone else attempts to define it for you. And if they try to diminish you, speak regardless, even if your voice trembles." There is a certain quality to her delivery, as if she were addressing herself as much as the listener. Following the presentation, students formed a line to express their gratitude. Some simply desired to shake her hand. Others sought guidance. One young woman, speaking softly, shared, "I'm studying engineering. I'm considering dropping out. I didn't believe there was a place for someone with my background." Nadira responded, making direct eye contact, "There is. And if there isn't, create it." That evening, back in her office, Nadira found herself alone at her desk, enjoying a cup of tea. Her inbox remained full. Her phone continued to buzz. The excitement hadn't fully subsided. She understood that the public's attention would fade. However, certain individuals would retain the memory. The students, the customers present in that bank lobby, the employees who witnessed a manager lose her position due to someone's unwillingness to yield. And perhaps, in the future, when a woman like her entered a place where she wasn't anticipated, she might be greeted instead of questioned. She might be respected, all because of one moment, one voice, one refusal to remain silent. If this story resonated with you, even slightly, please share it. Change doesn't always begin with prominent demonstrations or widespread media attention. Occasionally, it originates with a composed, persistent voice that states, "This isn't right."